Tonight, when the sun goes down, you're going to reach for a switch without thinking. Light will flood the room instantly. You won't feel the old animal relief that used to come with that. But your ancestors did, and by the end of this video you'll understand why the fear you still carry into a dark hallway is not a glitch in your brain. It's a signal from 10,000 generations ago that never got the memo to switch off. You already know the feeling. A creak in an empty house. A shadow that moves wrong. Your heart jumps before your mind even catches up. Most people call this irrational. It isn't. It's ancient, and it's older than fear itself, older than language, older than the idea of monsters. It goes back to a time when the dark genuinely could kill you, and your body has never stopped preparing for that night. Here's where it gets strange. Long before psychologists gave this feeling a name, the people of the Rig Veda already had one. They called the night Ratri, and they didn't treat her as empty space. They treated her as a goddess, a presence, something with will. The Ratri Sukta, a hymn dedicated entirely to her, asks her to keep away thieves and wolves, to let the household cross safely to the light of morning. Read that again. An entire hymn, thousands of years old, built around one request: protect us until the sun returns. That's not poetry for poetry's sake. That's a species negotiating with the thing that used to hunt it. Why would an entire civilization write prayers to the dark instead of simply avoiding it? Because avoiding it wasn't always possible, and pretending it wasn't dangerous would have gotten people killed. Think about what night actually meant before artificial light existed anywhere on Earth. Your eyes, built for daylight, become almost useless. Predators built for night vision do not share that problem. For nearly the entire span of human evolution, when the sun dropped, your ancestors' sensory advantage disappeared, and every other advantage disappeared with it. You couldn't see the branch that might be a snake. You couldn't tell friend from stranger at 20 paces. The world you'd mastered during the day became a world that had mastered you. And it wasn't a rare inconvenience. It happened every single night, without exception, for every human who ever lived before the last few centuries. Imagine that rhythm stamped into a species for hundreds of thousands of years. Danger at sunset, safety at sunrise. Over and over, night after night, until it wasn't a lesson your ancestors learned. It became a setting your body was born with. So the question shifts. It's not why are you afraid of the dark? It's how could you possibly not be? Now here's the twist most people never hear. The fear didn't just protect individuals, it built society. The anthropologist Polly Waisner spent years studying the Johonsi, a hunter-gatherer people in the Kalahari, and she noticed something the rest of us walk straight past. During the day, their conversations were practical, arguments, complaints, logistics. But at night, gathered around firelight, the entire tone changed. People told stories, myths, warnings about spirits and dangerous creatures that moved after dark. Wiesner's research, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, argued that firelight itself reshaped human conversation, pulling people away from daytime conflict and toward shared imagination, culture, and myth-making. The dark didn't just threaten your ancestors, it built their religions, it built their bonding rituals. It built the very stories that would one day become the Rig Veda's hymn to Ratri. Sit with that for a second. Every scary story a grandparent ever told you by a fire, every myth about something waiting in the shadows may be a direct descendant of a survival strategy. Fear, wrapped in narrative, passed hand to hand, generation to generation, because the tribes who told good warning stories were the tribes who lost fewer people to the dark. Notice what Wiesner's data actually implies, because it's easy to miss on a first pass. She wasn't just observing that people told scary stories at night, she was documenting a switch. Daytime talk, by her count, ran heavily toward economic and social friction, complaints, disputes, negotiations. Firelight talk ran almost entirely toward myth, humor, and information about the unseen. The dark didn't simply frighten people into silence. It reorganized what an entire community chose to talk about every single evening, for as long as humans have gathered around flame. That's not a small cultural detail. That's one of the oldest scheduling systems our species ever built, and it was written entirely by fear of what waited past the firelight. But storytelling alone doesn't explain why fear itself feels so physical. Why your palms sweat, why your pulse spikes before you've even seen anything. This is where the primatologist Richard Wrangham's work becomes essential. Wrangham spent decades studying how fire changed the human species, not just our diet, but our biology and our social structure. Once early humans controlled fire, they gained something no other primate had: a safe zone after dark, a perimeter of light predators wouldn't cross. Wrangham's research suggests this changed everything about how humans slept, gathered, and organized their group. But notice what that safe zone implies. If the fire's edge was safety, then everything beyond it, by definition, was danger. Your ancestors didn't just fear the dark in the abstract. They learned, night after night, generation after generation, exactly where the boundary was. And your body still remembers that boundary today, even though the modern world no longer has one. That's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. You don't live near predators anymore. Statistically, the dark in your bedroom is one of the safest environments a human has ever experienced. And yet the amygdala, the almond-shaped structure buried deep in your brain that processes threat, doesn't check statistics. It checks pattern, reduced visibility, enclosed unfamiliar space, silence that could be hiding something. Those patterns trip the same ancient alarm whether you're standing in a Kalahari savanna 40,000 years ago or standing in your own hallway at 2 a.m., reaching for a light switch you know is 3 steps away. The neuroscientist Joseph Leduc spent much of his career mapping exactly this circuit, showing how a threat signal can reach the amygdala and trigger a full-body response before the slower, reasoning parts of your brain even finish processing what you're looking at. In other words, your fear doesn't wait for permission from your logic. By the time your conscious mind catches up and says it's just a code on a hook, your heart has already been pounding for a full second or more. That gap, tiny as it feels, used to be the difference between reacting to a predator in time and reacting too late. So the jump you feel is not your mind failing you. It's your mind protecting you exactly the way it was built to, at a speed logic was never fast enough to match. Here's the counterintuitive part almost nobody expects. This fear was never a flaw to be fixed. It was a feature so effective that it outlived the very danger it was built for. Consider the Vedic framing again, because it gets something scientifically precise almost by accident. The Rakshasas, the shape-shifting beings said to prowl at night in Vedic literature, aren't described as dangerous everywhere. They're described as most active and most dangerous specifically after dark, near dusk, and through the night, weakest in daylight. Strip away the mythological language, and you're left with an accurate ecological observation. The real threats your ancestors faced, nocturnal predators, rival groups moving under cover, genuinely were more dangerous at night and less dangerous by day. The myth isn't decoration on top of the fear. The myth is the fear, translated into a story so it could be remembered, repeated, and passed down without anyone needing to understand neuroscience. That's the real function of every monster, under the bed story you were ever told. Not to scare you for fun. To encode a survival lesson in a form a child's brain would actually retain. And this is where the mirror turns back on you directly. You still do this. Not with wolves. With modern versions of the same instinct. You check that a door is locked twice. You feel uneasy walking to your car through an empty parking structure at night, even in a safe neighborhood. You flinch at a horror movie even though you know consciously, completely, that nothing on that screen can touch you. None of that is weakness. That's 40,000 years of Raytree Sukta logic still running quietly in the background of a nervous system that has no idea it's the 21st century. Notice, too, what you reach for when that unease shows up. Not a spear. Not a fire. A phone screen, glowing in the dark, pulled close to your face like a small portable perimeter of light. You scroll, you check a group chat, you put on a video just to have sound in the room. It looks like a habit. It's actually a ritual, the same ritual your ancestors performed with flame and firelight talk. Just miniaturized into your palm. You didn't invent that behavior. You inherited it, and then you found a new tool to perform it with. Even your children do this without being taught. Watch a child instinctively want a nightlight, or refuse to walk into a dark room alone, and you're watching the Raytree Sukta play out in real time, minus the Sanskrit, minus the fire, but carrying the exact same request underneath it. Let me be safe until the light comes back. Here's the part that actually resolves the open loop from the very beginning of this video. The reason you still feel that jolt of fear in the dark isn't because something is wrong with you. It's because that fear worked. It worked so well, for so long, across so many generations, that evolution never had a reason to remove it. Fear that keeps you alive doesn't get edited out just because the world changes faster than biology can keep up. Your ancestors who felt nothing in the dark, who didn't flinch, who didn't tell their children stories about Raytree or Rakshasas or things that move after sunset, simply didn't survive to pass that calm down to you. You are, quite literally, the descendant of the ones who were afraid enough and careful enough to make it to morning. So the next time the lights go out and that small, old feeling rises in your chest, don't brush it off as irrational. It's not fear malfunctioning. It's a hymn older than the Rig Veda, still being sung by your own nervous system, still asking the same question your ancestors asked 100 generations ago beside a fire. Let me light this room for you before you leave. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you'll reach for a switch without thinking. But now you'll know what your hand is really doing. It isn't turning on a light. It's closing the same ancient perimeter your ancestors built around a fire, in a language of safety far older than the switch itself.